today we have the lovely Rebecca Hales returning for the festival this year to do part 2 of her workshop on screenwriting. Last year she did part 1, sort of a broad basic view of how to be a screenwriter and story. And if you guys are interested, I can also share you part 1 if you want to look at that later. Just let us know. In part 2, we're going to discuss sort of more in depth on like character development and world building and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Is that it? Are you guys going to introduce yourselves? Or?
Yes, we should, I guess. I'm Rebecca. I'm Trish. We're 180 Sisterhood people who thought this was a good idea. We also run our production company 180 Sisterhood, and we're just excited to have you guys here and continue like growing the film industry in the North. So,
yeah. Rebecca moved here from ultimately Vancouver, but then we met in Toronto and, uprooted her whole life to come back to my hometown to start a company here and film here and build the community here. So we're really happy to have this community because it's different from what we had in Toronto. And we were just talking this morning about how Northern Ontario really is there's a special experience that you have up here producing over Toronto and Vancouver, where it's, it's just such a big, busy business. And even if you build your team, it's hard to kind of rein everyone in because there's
so much
everyone's scattered. So it's really nice to have this community here, and it's really a special experience, and we wouldn't be able to do what we do without this community. So, yeah.
And among other things, Trish and Rebecca have feature films premiering on December 1st on CBC.
We'll be screening the trailer closing night actually with the film How to Help the Porcupine.
Yes.
Very cool.
And the Sioux is actually filmed as the Sioux, so it's exciting. That was a fun one for us.
Yeah. And I just want to say thank you to our sponsors this year who have kindly donated cash and time services to help us make this happen, including the Bush Pine has been very supportive of the event this year, even with our new capacity, which is unfortunate, but I'm still thankful we can do this. So.
All right.
It's mine? Okay, I have to do this. But I have permission, and now I have lipstick on the inside of my mask, so that's sexy. Okay, so last year we did essentially like a screenwriting 101. It was really basic for anybody who saw it or who attended. I guess it was all on Zoom. It's me on that tiny little screen. But we covered all of the real basic things, where to find your screenwriting software, the basics of like a 3-act structure, because it's the most common. It's not necessarily the most sophisticated, but it is the most common story structure that's used in screenwriting. And some basic tools on like how to create a really good character, how to write really good action, and sort of what are the major do's and don'ts. So that's in last year's. If you want to take a look at it, I think it's still on the website, or it's available through the website. She'll figure it out. So what we're going to do is go from there to essentially like film 102. So the main question that I usually get asked, I get asked it often by undergrads, which is like, so how do I go from writing a short to writing a feature? And the worst answer I've ever heard is just make it longer, because that doesn't help anything. So the thing about a short is that it has this much conflict built into it, because you've got like 10 minutes, 15, if you're really pushing it, 20 minutes to resolve that conflict nicely. Because the thing about a film is that it has a beginning and a middle and an end, and then it's done. We don't assume a lot happens before the camera rolls. We don't assume anything happens after the camera stops. We're out of the story. So in order to have a feature film, what you need is to have a big enough story engine to drive you from the very beginning, when the camera turns on, to the very, very end. And that is the more complex problem. That's the thing we're supposedly just making it longer. We're actually making it more complex. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. And out of that is going to come questions of character and how do I build character and all of that kind of stuff. Sound good? Okay, awesome. So the first thing is about building better conflict in and among your characters. So if you've got a film and a handful of characters who would take place in it, you might have an ensemble cast or you might have a protagonist. And we'll talk a little bit later about the difference between a protagonist and a hero, and a protagonist and an antagonist and a villain and all of those things. But right now, what we're talking about is using tension to help those people, those characters, hold their shape. And I don't mean tension of like forces pushing at each other necessarily. I often just mean the tension that exists naturally between two people that keep us sort of orbiting at this distance from one another. So I see the world the same way that you do, but I also am very different from you. So we'll never get any closer than this, but we don't necessarily have to get any further apart. What you want to do is have that kind of tension between all of your characters in every direction, so that if you were to draw it out, you would have essentially like the spokes of an old wagon wheel, and that it holds your characters together. And what you do throughout the script is you sort of bounce them off of each other. So in this scene, these two characters are in conflict, but then they'll work together in the next one. And in this scene, these two characters are in conflict, and then they'll work together in the next one. Does that make sense? So that's the inherent conflict between that. What's really exciting about that is that because there is a certain amount of tension, and because we know they don't necessarily see the world eye to eye, each character then has to have 3 dimensions. They can't be a sock puppet. They can't be a cardboard stand-in. They have to be real humans. So no one is perfect. No one is an angel. No one is like so dreamy and there's nothing wrong whatsoever. That's not how that works. Everyone has a flaw. And as you work your way towards writing a really quality screenplay as a feature, your job is to look at the humans around you and say, what are the flaws in you that make you beautiful? What are the flaws in you that also make you difficult to live with? And how do I work these gently into here so that you don't recognize yourself? But one of those big things is to not choose flaws that are really obvious rubber stamps. So like, this character's perfect, except she's really clumsy. That's, you smell those characters coming a mile away and you've got no time for them, at least among other filmmakers. You gotta get into the right headspace to accommodate characters like that, or half a bottle of wine, whatever works best for you. So I think that once you have characters who make sense and sort of rub each other the wrong way, then together, or separately, they can tackle bigger problems, right? So your goal is to set up an inciting incident that brings you bigger problems. And you have characters now who can face and possibly fail at bigger problems. So if you go back to your inciting incident, normally what that is some event that demands your characters get involved. So like if we go back to Speed, a bus blows up and Keanu Reeves is the detective, so I guess I'm getting involved, and lo and behold, he's on the next bus with a bomb, right? So it's pretty obvious, a bus blows up. Not every script is going to have life or death stakes like that. So if you were to look at August Osage County, for example, that's based on a play, you're looking at a script where the inciting incident is like, somebody's dead, so we're all coming to the funeral. Somebody died before the camera rolled, but the day we all show up for the funeral, that's where things kick in. And it turns out the inciting incident is putting all of these people in the same room, which, as it turns out, is a terrible idea. I don't recommend it for them. So an example that I often use when I'm teaching is if you have a character who owns a farm and is dependent on getting a loan every year to get the seed in order to pay the mortgage, in order to do the things to keep the farm, and this year, that character is denied access to their loan. So now I'm not gonna get the loan, I can't get the seed, I won't have the crop, I won't reap the benefits of that, I can't pay the mortgage, my family's gonna end up homeless. That's the inciting incident. Someone said no, and it sets off that whole chain of events, right? So the idea is to set up an inciting incident that's gonna drive your story forward. And what you want to do is then slowly increase the stakes. And stakes are what we're gonna talk about next. So we're gonna talk about our farmer. It's the easiest example that I have, and I always keep it in my back pocket. So if I am the farmer, the stakes are the thing that's on the line. Now I've said that I want my loan, so that's my goal. My goal is to get the loan. And if I can't get the loan, then I've got to get the money, right? So I have a goal, and I'm going to be pursuing my goal. But what's at stake? What happens to me and to my life if I fail to meet that goal? Well, in this case, if I fail to meet the goal, I'm losing my farm and my family ends up homeless. That's what's at stake. And what's attached to that is this little underlying thing that takes a long time to get used to, but it's the like, well, why? Like, so what? So you lose your farm, you can go and, I don't know, live with your brother-in-law. So this happens, what's so bad about that? And you want to answer the question, what's so bad about that is that I said that this would never happen. Okay, but yeah, but why? Like, this isn't the end of the world, so why is this the worst thing that could happen? Well, because I don't ever want to put my wife in that position. I don't ever want to put my kids in that position. Yeah, but why? And when you get to the end of all of the whys, you find out this is someone who was raised in extreme poverty and vowed, like, never, ever to go back there. So now I've got this internal drive of panic that I will not live that nightmare again. This external drive of I've got a finite amount of time to get this money or get this loan or I lose my farm. And then you have that goal, let's get the money. So my job as a protagonist is to pursue that goal, no matter what. I am not taking a moment to go and like have a slice of pizza. I'm not gonna have a quiet discussion with my neighbor about something else. I am pursuing my goal. So that even when you have those quiet moments between your characters, they have to be working towards building who the character is so that they can get to their goal. So I'm in pursuit of my goal. And I'm dragging all of this emotional baggage behind me because we need the emotional baggage because it's a feature. We're going to be here for 90 minutes. It's a long time. So I'm dragging all of this stuff behind me. And what you need to do as a screenwriter is make sure that every time I take a step in the direction of my goal, I'm going to hit a wall. And that's the worst and it's the best. So fair warning to you as potential screenwriters, your job is to torment your characters. You must be absolutely cruel and evil to them. What is the worst thing that could happen to this person? Being told no when you ask for your loan, which you've had every year for, say, 15 years. This year's a no, why? You've got to do the worst thing. And you've got to constantly place them in the face of an obstacle that they are not sure they can overcome. So the idea is every step that I take forward in a story, I'm standing at a precipice, I can see the land on the other side. Can I jump that far? And am I willing to? Am I gonna take this decision? Am I gonna choose this course of action? Am I gonna react this way? Because every time I do, it turns me just a little bit. It changes who I am. Not a lot. I'm not gonna wake up tomorrow morning and decide to be a serial killer because I didn't get my loan. Like, that's not gonna make any sense, right? But I might wake up tomorrow morning and be the kind of person who's willing to sell the jewelry that my mom left me, even though I swore I never would because it's all I have left of her. I might wake up that person tomorrow morning if I get desperate enough. I might wake up desperate enough tomorrow morning to like hold up the bank. But I've gotta get there, one step at a time. And so that's what you do. You place an obstacle in front of them that is not something they can work around. It's not something they can magic away. It is in front of them. It is actively coming at them. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But if that obstacle is there, I have to find a way to keep moving forward because I'm in pursuit of my goal. And this is between me and my goal. So if that's going to be the case, every time I overcome an obstacle, it's got fallout. Right? Every decision that you make in your lives has fallout. We hope the fallout is absolute minimum, right? Like that little feather in Forrest Gump, it's just drifting on the wind, no one's gonna get hurt, except that, like, that's not how life actually works. We make decisions that are the best thing we can do for ourselves, and at the end of the day, someone else gets hurt. We may not have seen it coming, or we may have known that's exactly what's gonna happen. I'm gonna drop the ball on this and someone's gonna pay the consequences, but I just need a minute. So I'm not gonna meet today's deadline. I'm not gonna move this way. So every time you make one of those choices for your characters, it keeps moving forward. And every time I make that choice and I've moved past it and I'm like, I'm on my way to my goal. Nope, because that decision has consequences and those consequences are gonna come back to me. And so again, the next decision is gonna have consequences and those are gonna come back to me. And that's what the middle of Act 2 is. That's it. We're just going to spend a whole lot of time talking about you doing stuff and having terrible, terrible consequences as the result. The oldest description of a story that I can think of, given all of my schooling, is in Act 1, put your character up a tree. In Act 2, throw rocks at them. In Act 3, get them down. That's it. It's not complicated. It's just the mechanics of your story are going to get complicated. But as long as you keep those kinds of things in your head, you'll know, am I throwing rocks at them? And am I softballing those rocks because I really like those characters and I don't want them to suffer? The one metaphor that I would use, and since we're all grown-ups, I'm going to use it here, is that as a writer, you have a dominant-submissive relationship with your audience. You are the dominant. It is your job to punish them until you know they need just a little bit of pleasure. And then you provide them a little bit of pleasure until it's time to punish them again, right? So your feelings about your work, park them at the door and then sit down and do the terrible things to your character. We'll pick up your feelings later. You can have a cry about it tomorrow. That's okay. But today, we're going to torment your protagonist and we're going to drive them all the way through to your ending. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's essentially the nature of conflict, but the nature of an obstacle is just a little bit different. So an obstacle is anything that is in direct opposition of you pursuing your goal. It's not a locked door. I'm in this room and the door is locked. Oh no. It's probably about 7 ways to get out of the room, including punching your way through the wall, depending on whether or not you're the Hulk, right? So that's like a small p problem, but that's not an obstacle that you're going to be able to work your way through. What you need is something that is directly confrontational. And in order to do that, it's probably going to come from your antagonist. So we're going to take a moment and we're going to talk about protagonists and antagonists. So your protagonist is not necessarily the person who spends the most time on the screen. They're not necessarily the person that your audience likes the most. And they're not always the person who is like the key in the trailer. They're the person whose decisions drives the story forward. So going back to the example of the farmer, that farmer's decisions are what's going to move it forward. But they're sharing an equal amount of time with their spouse, with the person at the bank, maybe with their kids. So when you look at the numbers laid out, the minutes in story time doesn't necessarily equal protagonist. Minutes in screen time doesn't necessarily equal protagonist. So take a look at what the decisions are that are moving your story forward. Those usually belong to your protagonist. And if you have a number of those decisions that don't come from your protagonist, then your protagonist probably isn't active enough and needs to make choices. Even if your plot is something that requires your protagonist to do A, and normally your protagonist wouldn't choose to do A just sort of happens, and your protagonist happens to sort of be there. So, A is the thunderstorm, A is, the tidal wave. Well, if the antagonist of my story is Mother Nature, then cool, thunderstorm, tidal wave, not a problem. But if the antagonist to my story is the guy who said no to my loan, then thunderstorm is not a thing that I can choose, right? So that doesn't help. But what will help you in that moment is, oh, I know there's a thunderstorm coming and I choose to take this action of, being out in my fields, planting things by hand because I just need to finish this row before I go in the house. Or I'm taking this risk with my animals, or I'm climbing my roof for terrible reasons in a thunderstorm. No one should be on a roof. But whatever choice your protagonist makes, that's what's going to move the story forward. And so it's their choices that help you move your way through the story. So my choice for how I react to the obstacle that is a surprise, obstacle is always a surprise, or obstacle was like kind of anticipated, but I hoped we were going to avoid it. Yeah, obstacle's always going to be there. My choice in that moment gets me past this obstacle. Amazing, moving to my goal. Nope. Again, you're not getting that far because my choice has consequences, and those come back to me. So your protagonist is making those kinds of choices, but they can't live in a bubble by themselves. They need something working against them, because again, we need enough conflict to move your story forward. So that thing that's working against them, that's going to be your antagonist. And I'm going to differentiate here between protagonist and hero and antagonist and villain, because mostly in my head they serve slightly different purposes. So a protagonist makes decisions that drives the story forward. We love it. Your protagonist can be 5 years old, your protagonist can be a serial killer, your protagonist can be anyone. It's terrible that I chose a 5-year-old and a serial killer. That's a bad combination. Just realized that. Sorry. Yeah, it's true. Well, it's also a fairly extreme example, right? Most of us don't get involved in that kind of stuff. So those are your protagonists. And again, they don't have to be up against anything huge, right? If you look back at the films that we watched as children, those aren't typically life and death stakes. Like Radio Flyer, now I'm dating myself. Radio Flyer, not life and death stakes. Like
Little Mermaid.
not, well,
No,
It's kind of life and death.
It's life and death.
It's
What are you
like
talking about?
keep this
She
fish
sells her
leg
entire
or
soul.
like get the legs. So that one, life or death.
She sells her soul.
She does sell her soul.
she sold her soul.
And her voice.
And she was walking on razor
The worst
blades,
thing you could do.
which is more the fairy tale. Anyway,
Yeah.
so
Life or death.
protagonist is dealing with things that feel to them like life or death. So if you were 5, would the end of the world be life or death, or could you actually wrap your head around that? Probably not. But like someone stealing your doll, that is life or death. Someone sneaking into your room, that is life or death. Someone bullying you on the playground, that is life or death. So for my farmer, because we're going back to the farmer, not getting the loan, that feels like life and death to him, right? Because he's got that emotional core that is like, if I lose my farm, that is the equivalent to dying, and I can't do that, right? But your hero is always dealing with life or death, because your hero is not dealing on a one-to-one basis. Your hero doesn't care what happens to you. Your hero cares what happens to all of humanity. I'm going to save the whole city. I'm Superman. I'm going to save the whole world. I'm Flash Gordon. I'm going to run really fast, and that's somehow going to solve everybody's problems. I never understood that thing. So you oftentimes have characters who are heroes who are in fact bigger than life. They don't need to be human. They don't need to be fallible in the way that humans are, right? So if we're going to go back to the Superman example, because he's really the most obvious one, he doesn't have the same kind of flaws that you and I have. Like one of his biggest flaws is that he's like a down-home kid from Kansas. I mean, he's from another planet, but like he's a down-home kid from Kansas. So, you know, at the end of the day, like his mom made his very first costume. So those aren't life or death things, right? But he's going to go up against people whose goal primarily is to threaten the safety of the world, right? The entire Marvel verse, except for the newest one, revolves around Thanos eliminating half of all life in the universe. That's not like just an antagonist. That's a capital V villain. They're dealing with different problems. We're going to leave them over there because none of us in the next immediate future are going to access the kind of budget to do a superhero movie anyway. So just scoop them that way. They don't take that much work. They work really, really hard to try and create interest for you because the interest isn't inherent to the characters. Next time you watch one of those movies, ask yourself, is the plot super interesting or are the characters interesting? The answer is it's the plot, right? And the zingy one-liners that they throw out just often enough to keep you laughing so that you stay put in your chair. A real antagonist is a person with a goal, and that goal lives in opposition to your protagonist. I'm going towards my goal. I'm the protagonist. This is amazing. Antagonist, no, you're not. I'm getting in your way. And it's not necessarily malicious, right? So your antagonist can say, I have a goal of my own, and I'm in pursuit of it, and why do you keep getting in my way, right? Or your antagonist can say, I dislike you, or whatever it is that you stand for, or I think that your goal is terrible, so I'm actively going to try and stop you. That's not a problem. Or your antagonist can say, I don't care about you and your goal, but I work for a guy who pays me a lot of money and he cares about you and your goal, so I'm going to stop you because that's what I get paid for, right? So in the case of our farmer, the goal is get the loan. Your antagonist is the guy who works at the bank, who normally says yes to your loan. And this year, he's been told, if you approve one more of these stupid farm loans, I'm firing you. You're done. Your career is on the line now. Do we understand that? That makes sense, right? I can't say yes to you. This is my career, and I've got no other options. So I am definitely saying no to you. And I have suddenly become the antagonist in your story. I am the protagonist of my story, thank you very much. That's when you know you've got a good story, right? Because you feel bad for the antagonist, or at least, especially if they're taking, slightly negative choices in behavior, you can at least understand where they're coming from. So if you can tug at your audience's heartstrings with your antagonist, just make sure that you're tugging a little harder with your heartstrings for the protagonist. But then you've got a good story, right? Because now you have these people who are working against one another, and neither of them is entirely wrong. And that's what you want, right? You want to drive it forward. If you're a really good screenwriter, you might find a way to work in the stakes for the antagonist. So we know that he's going to get fired, but so? There are other jobs in this town. Why is that the job? So what's on the line for you? If you can work that in, now you've got an amazing film. Because now you don't just have a protagonist going against their goal. Now you've got actual head-to-head conflict. And every time we meet one another, we've both changed just a little bit, just enough. So I think our next conflict's going to take us here. Nope, it's going to be a little bit over here. This one's going to be a little bit over here. But I keep bumping into the same? No, it's a little bit different conflict. You smell the same, but you're a little bit different. You look the same, but you're a little bit different. So that I'm also not bumping my head up against a brick wall, right? I'm not repeating the same thing. My audience can only take about 30 seconds of that, and then they're gone. And you know what that's like to be in a film where you're totally lost in the story and something happens and you're removed from the story. And now you're like, I am watching a movie. This part is kind of boring. I wonder if there's more popcorn. Can I sneak out? I think I have to pee. Maybe if I just press pause. We all know what that feels like. So you know when you're removed from the story. If you repeat the same conflict again and again, that's what's going to happen to your audience. They're going to fall out of the story, and then they're going to lose their interest. We have the attention span of gnats. So if you lose sight of the story, you will definitely lose your audience. So each piece of conflict needs to have changed just a little bit. And we did this earlier. We said that the story was going to change our characters a little bit, and now the conflict is going to change them a little bit. The idea is that every bit of conflict impacts your character, and they both turn just a little bit, right? Sounds good? Okay, so how are we for time? Okay, good. I could go on for a while. So if I've got all of these things now, I have a premise that has built into it enough inherent conflict. I've got a farmer, they need a loan, I live in a farming community, everybody else got their loan this year, why didn't I get my loan this year? It's gonna be an amazing year for crops and I'm late getting my seed in, whatever the conflict is, that's inherent to the premise. And those things aren't gonna change. My town's not gonna suddenly change tomorrow. The conditions brought on by the weather or by the quality of my soil, that's not gonna change tomorrow. So the premise itself has enough built-in issues that can generate their own conflict. Awesome, good base layer. And now my story has enough conflict built into it that's gonna be a big enough explosion to move my engine down the road, right? So I need a loan, otherwise my family ends up homeless, and I've been told no. That's another good layer. That's a really good layer. And then me as a person, as a character, I've got this stuff inside me that works for me and that works against me. So imagine if the farmer going into that bank is a very stubborn person and very tenacious. The farmer is not leaving that chair until someone says yes, which is amazing. And I buy it. I buy that stubborn farmer because the first time I met that stubborn farmer, he was like working to get this one rock out, and it was hours of him unearthing that one rock to get it out of his field. Amazing. But now sitting in the chair, you can only do that for so long before the cops get called, right? So like at some point you have to make the decision, do I save face and leave the bank of my own volition? Or like, do I push this and let the cops get called, right? But say maybe instead of being stubborn, that farmer is actually really passive aggressive, which makes them kind of petty. So the first response is, oh, you're gonna say no to me? That's fine, not a problem. I mean, my wife teaches kindergarten, your kid's in that class, so like, there's gonna be consequences, but your kid's gonna pay a little bit, you know. Like, that's a different kind of farmer. And it doesn't matter what characteristics I give that farmer, because the story's already gonna move forward. The story already has enough conflict in it, it's going. Which means that I, as a writer, get to decide who's this guy gonna be. Because I know his problems, and I know the core of what's gonna hurt him. I know the core of what's gonna drive him forward. What I don't know is, how's he gonna handle it, right? Is he quietly tenacious? Is he like, okay, I'm gonna give him a day to think about it. I'm gonna assemble my finances, and tomorrow I'm going back in with a new plan about how I can put I'm gonna sell my mom's jewelry and I'm gonna bring this much money to the table and maybe that'll help. Maybe I can entice him. And goes back and tries again. Not doing it. But that pushes him in a different direction, right? So, premise, lots of conflict. The actual inciting incident brings lots of conflict. Who I am as a character brings lots of conflict. That's what's gonna get you all the way through. Does that make sense? Okay, so then what do I do with my antagonist? Because they gotta do stuff, right? They can't just be there. So your goal then is to develop a bit of a storyline for your antagonist. And it doesn't need to be big. So if we were to map these things out on a wall, we would have, I'm gonna do your left to right as opposed to mine, but if we have the very beginning and we spend a little time in the world with them and we get to know who they are, even if it's an hour, even if it's one party, even if it's just one morning of their routine, I can learn a lot about someone, about how they handle their lives. And I can learn a lot about how someone can handle their problems by giving them like a other choice. Act 2 is going to absolutely throw you for a loop. We're going great, things are terrible. Or maybe this instead, inciting incident, don't get my loan, and things start to immediately decline. Like I don't get my loan, and now I can't get enough money for mom's jewelry because like the pawnbroker's a jerk, or because they're a pawnbroker and they don't give you a lot of money, you know, and my wife has threatened to leave me, and it turns out she's pregnant, like everything. Ooh, terrible. At that midpoint, give them a win. Like, let something go well. Because if a movie just declines and keeps declining, then you get like Requiem for a Dream, where at the end you feel like your soul has been like sucked out your ears and you can't, like you just can't, or maybe that was just me. I like turned it off and was like, I can't do anything anymore. I needed a minute. So what you wanna do is Act 2, this is, I'm either going up or I'm going down, doesn't matter. The story's gonna turn. And usually what happens at that midpoint in Act 2 is I, as the protagonist, learn something new about the situation that changes my perspective. And the best way to look at this is to look at the bad 80s action movies, because it's the most obvious point. I'm gonna drive forward, everything is amazing, and then the middle of Act 2 is when your hero stops running and decides to stay and fight. I'm going to stand my ground. I am the Karate Kid, so immediately after this, I'm going to have a training montage. I am Rambo. Immediately after this, I'm going to make sure that I can shoot all of my weapons for no reason. So whatever it is that's happening, I have decided to stand my ground. Amazing. Okay, so now we feel empowered, right? We've done a training montage. We feel like we're good to go. I know how to use a sword, because that's exactly what happens in the Buffy movie, right? She finds out, she trains, we're good to go. And then everything needs to fall apart again. And this time it needs to fall apart hard. Like big, ugly, oh crap, hard. Because at the end of Act 2 is this lovely little turning point that in Save the Cat, they call it like the point of no return. They call it like the dark night of the soul. You'll see those different terms in various screenwriting books. But essentially, that turning moment between Act 2 and Act 3 is that oh shit moment that you as an audience have where you're like, I don't think they're going to make it. That panic of feeling that the next problem that faces your protagonist is going to be too big a problem for them to tackle naturally. And that's actually the truth. What you want to have happen is the final problem needs to be something that's going to stretch them as a person. Not like a Gumby style, but actually like stretch who they are, stretch their decisions. And they are going to have to make the choice to stretch that one little bit further. So like, I am going to learn to do this thing. I am going to face this opponent. I am going to burn down the store. I am going to, kill my boss. I'm going to, whatever it is, right? But they make that choice so that when they march into that climax, they go in, eyes open, I'm going in, right? And so when you look at like Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey, that's that that final descent into the cave. You don't descend into a cave without knowing where you're going into a cave. So you go into this, eyes open. Whether or not they succeed or fail in the climax, that's your choice. But they need to know what they're getting into. And what they're getting into doesn't always have to be exactly meeting up with their expectations. They think they're gonna fight the bad guy. The bad guy brought a gun to a knife fight, right? We remember that moment from Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? Whip, gun. How did that go? Oh no, I think it was sword and gun, right? So that didn't end well with the guy with the sword, right? He got shot a lot. So once that happens, you've got to decide what the fallout is going to be for your protagonist. So whatever it is that you've decided is going to be the big bad, that's what they face in the climax, right? If you've got a ticking clock, so you have to get your loan or you have to have your seed planted by this date, otherwise you're not going to have the crop, you won't be able to reap it. So like all of the things fall out from that. We have a ticking clock, so now we're getting towards the ticking clock. My story's done a bunch of this stuff, and now I've got this dark night of the soul where I don't think I'm going to make it. And then, nope, I'm going to give it the last college try, and I'm going to give it everything that I have because I've been kind of holding back until now because I didn't think I had it in me to do all of this stuff. But now I'm like, whatever. Like, if everything is on the line, I might as well just throw it all in and see what happens. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to beat the ticking clock. I'm going to beat my arch nemesis, who is, the farmer from down the road, or who is the guy from the bank. I'm going to beat this person who has been this obstacle for me. And then, yay, I do it. I didn't think I could, but like now my kids are planting seed in the middle of the night because, who needs to be awake for the second grade? Whatever it is that your hero, your character does in that moment gets them through that climax. And then you have this nice little bit at the end where your story like ties off nicely and you can wrap up all of your loose ends. And what that denouement, that's what it's called, when you get to that place, your protagonist might not be in a great place emotionally. It doesn't always have to have a happy ending. Sometimes the most satisfactory ending is the ending that feels like the truth, and the truth is we don't always get happy endings, right? So it might be that you got that thing that you were fighting for this whole time, which is awesome because you got to keep the family farm, but it cost you your wife and your kids. And maybe you'll get them back and maybe you won't. Or it cost you a lifelong friendship, somebody you had on your side through this whole thing. And in the end, you said, I'm throwing this friendship under the bus. I'm going to get my goal no matter what, right? So those are the kinds of things that are on the line. So the thing about the climax is it answers a question that was asked in the inciting incident, which is like, why this person and why today? right? What are you going to do about it? Well, it's this farmer and it's today, because today is the day he heard no. So what's he going to do about it? He's going to do whatever happens in the climax. That's what he's going to do about it. So the end result of you doing something about it isn't just that, like, you and I resolve this situation. It's that my stakes come back, right? So what's at stake for my farmer? Keeping the land, keeping my farm. And why is that at stake? Why is that so important to me? Because at the heart of me, I am terrified of my family ending up in abject poverty. I cannot allow my family to be homeless. This is morally unacceptable to me, because that's the equivalent of my death, right? So what happens in the climax, right? I achieve my goal. Yes, kept the family farm, which means my stakes don't come to pass, which is awesome. But like, there's also that thing that lived inside me that is gonna need to be answered. Because this whole journey has been questioning that and slowly like dragging it to the surface. And you've all seen those movies where like 2 or 3 times your protagonist says something that you're like, ooh, you are not supposed to say that out loud. Forrest Gump has the best quotable moments. And you know those moments always end up in the trailer, right? I may not be a smart man, but I know what love is. None of us would ever say that out loud, right? We would never own to that. Muriel's wedding, she's crying and she says to her friends, I'm not nothing. You are never supposed to admit that secretly in your heart you're terrified that you're nothing, right? So this whole movie, we've been dragging that deep, dark thing to the surface. So in the climax, we may have addressed the stakes, but the immediate aftermath is we have to address that thing, right? So you are either going to therapy or like, someone has saved you and everything will be fine. You know, like, I got the girl. So clearly my heart is gonna be fine and this will totally work out great. So maybe it will, maybe it won't. So that essentially, that's the shape of the way that you're gonna create your feature. And those are the things that you're gonna do with your protagonist and your antagonist. And that last little moment at the end, when you're addressing that thing that's at the heart of your protagonist, you can go ahead and address the thing that's at the heart of your antagonist too. It's a great moment. It's a really great moment. So if you think about the movie 1 Hour Photo with Robin Williams, you go through this whole movie and he's doing this creepy stuff. Like he's stealing this woman's photos and he's breaking into her house and he's kind of stalking their family, and it's super creepy, and it's also terrible because it's Robin Williams, and you know when he does drama way too much. It's too much. So when you get to the end, there's that final police interview and he sort of explains himself. He just sort of gives you this moment from his childhood. And he doesn't say, this moment happened and therefore I am this kind of crazy and therefore I stalked this woman. He just, for whatever reason in that moment, explains this bath time with mom. And you're like, oh, there's a reason you're super crazy and I feel bad for you, but also you did bad things. So I'm okay with the movie ending the way that it did, even though I feel like, aw, about you. And that can happen too. It's a great way to end a film. Protagonist gets their goal, but you feel a little ugh for the antagonist. Those are the best ones, right? All right. Opening for questions? Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? And I also know that I am willing to answer questions about any other like writing related subject. I teach more than just screenwriting, so if you have general questions outside of the content of this, that's totally fine too. Yeah.
So naturally, obviously, when you're writing a script and you're trying to build tension with the farmer,
Yeah.
say, go on that example. I don't know if this is more like style or substance, but when we're writing that, should we be more, I don't know, subtle, or should we kind of base it out in like words? For example, if I was writing in the thought of a director, I would show it in like images. Basically, I would show that the soil isn't growing, and just have the farmer pick it up without words. Mm-hmm. But if I'm a first-time screenwriter, and possibly worried my scenes are getting cut or something, like I might have them say, I need to go to the bank to get this loan, take a look at my farm, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know how particularly we should write. Like, should I write more comfortably, like not being subtle, or should I write it more easier to the audience?
I think that is a style issue, and I think it depends on what kind of style you want to do. So if you have, screenwriters come in a couple of different varieties. If you have a mind that works like a director's mind, where you can see this whole scene in images and not just like, I feel like it'll play out like this, and that's the sort of movie in my head, but you know exactly this precise image, write the image in. Write the image in. Because if they need to write in later on, if they need to write in a piece of dialogue, that's not a problem. Or you can go in the opposite direction where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to get a director who's going to pick up on all of this, so I'm going to write the line in, and maybe they can replace the line with beautiful images. So it's kind of a 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but it's a style choice.
Well, and I feel like we talk about this a lot.
We do.
We're like, we'll call the first draft our vomit draft, where we literally will write all the images, all the dialogue first, and just get it all out there, because if you don't put it on the page, you'll never put it on the page.
Yeah.
So you should always, in your first draft, I feel like, put everything out on the page first, and then when you go to your rewrite and you work with the story editor, that's where you can kind of fine-tune your images and your dialogue. Should I use this or should I use that? Because you'll start feeling the flow of the story and get more into it, what your character is going on to.
Yeah. The other thing too is know that as a writer, as any kind of writer, your first draft, probably your first 3 drafts, they're going to be terrible. You are going to go back and read them and be like the next day and be like, this is embarrassing. It's fine. It's fine. The metaphor that was often used in film school was like, you're building a cake. You're just getting out all of the ingredients in the first 2 drafts. Like, it's going to get messy before it gets pretty, and you're like, don't worry about the window dressing. But yeah, get it all on the page if you're not sure. And then what'll happen for you as a writer is that as you go through multiple drafts, you'll find what your voice is. And then the more screenplays that you write, the more you can get into your voice in earlier drafts, right? And that's all it is. Yeah, and write it and keep writing it.
Yeah, and we also do these things where we collaborate a lot on scripts.
We do.
And we'll do these things where we'll do our development draft, and then we'll not look at it for 3 months. Yeah. To kind of sit with it in our heads for a long time, and then we go back and rewrite it or go over it. We're like, why did we ever put that in? Or this makes so much more sense now, and we'll slash and cut a bunch.
Oh yeah.
You can see it from an outsider's point of view.
Yeah, because you get too close
stepped
to it
away.
When you just finished it, you're like, this is my baby, and I don't want anybody to hurt it. But then you need that distance from it. So
yeah.
I find 3 to 6 months, depending on your deadlines, obviously, gives you that kind of.
Should we get an outside perspective on our first drafts, or no, on our final written drafts?
It really depends.
I will trust you, and I trust maybe 3 other writers. So I know most of the people that I know in my life are writers. I trust probably 4 people to read one of my first drafts and not die of humiliation as soon as I hit send in the email and just stew in it, because emotionally I cannot handle that kind of anxiety. But also, that's my reputation as a writer, and I didn't even spell check. I just sent it. So I have a tendency to write the first draft and then wait and then write the second draft and then be like, hey, here's my first draft. It's super rough. And, I spell checked it 7 times and had somebody else read it. But version 1 is what's on the title page. So so there's that. The other thing too that I don't feel like writers talk about enough is that let the story live in your head. If you got a good idea yesterday, awesome. Today is not the day you start writing. Today is the day you spend time. Because in order to break story, and we use the word break on purpose, you want to take your story, you want to explode it as big as you can, let it fall apart, and see how it comes together. The idea is to get your story watertight, so that there's no missing pieces. Your audience doesn't get to the end and says, yeah, but what about this thing that you talked about earlier and then you never addressed it? You want to make sure that you always get the motivation of the character onto the page, because that needs to make it onto the screen. There's nothing more frustrating than have a character take a piece of action and you're like, yeah, but why? And that in the script they probably had a why and it got left off. So the idea is to let it live in your head, live with the characters, live with the plot, and figure out whatever comes to you first. So sometimes you have a really great idea and you're like, this is amazing. Now I just need to figure out who's gonna have this story. Well, that's awesome. You get to create a character around what your story needs, so they will do exactly what your story wants them to do. But sometimes the character shows up first. You're like, okay, who are you and what kind of story do you want and why do you keep pushing me in this direction? I wanna go over here. Like, it takes a while to finagle those things together. Let it live in your head. Let it live in a notebook. I'm a big fan of notebooks. I always have one on me, or the notes app in my phone, the occasional back of a receipt. It's, my life is a little bit chaos in that.
For the accountant, but they know what you do.
Yeah.
When they read about like some sort of chase sequence or something on the back of it.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
lunch meeting receipt, it makes sense.
Yeah. So just let it live in your head. Let it stew in there. Let it change shapes. Don't get excited about it, but don't not get excited about it. So find that little happy medium where like, this seems like a good idea. I'm not gonna ruffle any feathers, but it's a good idea, and we're just gonna like tiptoe around it, right? And then once it gets on the page, here's my challenge to writers. I challenge all of my writers like this. That is no longer attached to you. That is ink on a page. It has nothing to do with who you are. It has nothing to do, it doesn't say anything about your soul, doesn't say anything about your value in the world, so that if you have a story editor like me, I can be a very brutal story editor. Screenwriters in general tend to not dance around things. Screenwriting is a very direct medium. We don't have the white space to spend on like purple prose. So we also then tend to be very direct when we're talking to people. And so my story editing can be very direct. My story editing is not about you. It's not about how I value you. And in fact, the more notes you have from me, the more excited I am about your script, because it means I'm giving you like three drafts worth of notes in one, because I get excited about all of it and I can see all of it. So I want you to be the most successful. So when you get a draft back from me and it's covered in pencil, that's always a good thing. So get excited about people who are as excited about your stories as you are.
And find someone you trust. Like, that's the big thing.
Yeah.
It's like, find someone
Huge.
you trust with your work, because it is still your work. It's still your baby, as much as Rebecca says to disassociate yourself with it. But it's hard. And but yeah, I mean, like, find the filmmakers or friends that you trust to read your material and you're comfortable with it. It doesn't mean like you have to send it to them first draft, second, third, fourth, fifth. Whenever you feel comfortable with somebody else reviewing your work.
And it can't be your mom.
And yeah.
Yeah.
But
No.
it's true. It needs to be somebody who understands story. And it doesn't have to be a filmmaker. It could be another writer, writes novel or whatever. But someone who understands story and someone you trust. Because they're going to give you real feedback.
Yep.
Also someone whose notes you would want to represent your vision.
Yeah.
Because when I was writing My Roommates in Escort Season 1 with my writing partner Katie, a lot of men in the industry who were older, it wasn't, and I say men because it wasn't a man's story to tell, it was about a woman my age with a roommate. So I did not send them the scripts to punch up like they suggested, having not ever even seen the scripts, they just volunteered. But if I were to have somebody do that, it would be, another female who understood my writing style or my perspective. Not like someone 3 times my age who maybe wasn't going through that at the moment, because I wanted it to still be my voice in my writing. So we chose to not send it to anyone so we could own our own failures.
No, but
So if
it's
it sucked, it was on us.
It's true. I'm in the process of producing a comedy series and getting funding for development for a writer's room. And with the creator, the mentor, showrunner, writer, and we're now like interviewing candidates to be part of the room. So we're asking people for script samples of comedies they've written, or we're looking at people who are literally stand-up comedians who can punch up jokes. Because it's something that happens a lot. And it's also something in the dramatic world where, like, if I was doing the drama way, I would maybe reach out to like one author of a novel who's a dramatic writer of prose, because that's also important because they understand long story.
Yeah. We had a question over here.
Yeah, I wanted to add something to those points because I think they're really meaningful, and I just wanted to add on, like, don't keep believing in your work and be discerning on whose feedback you're taking because, for example, my first short story, I got it published, and my boyfriend at the time read it, and his feedback for me was, I don't get this story, there's no ending. It's been closed. No congrats, nothing. That crushed me.
So if you listen to that.
And if I had listened to that, I wouldn't have made it into a screenplay.
Yeah.
So I think be discerning, stay true to your story, don't let people dilute it, but at the same time be open to receiving proper feedback and criticism from people who can help build your story and those structural elements while remaining true.
Yeah. Especially if you can find someone who immediately recognizes your weakness as a writer. So my brain obviously works very structurally first, right? I want to know the mechanics of what happens and then, like, we'll deal with the feelings later. Except that when it comes time for me to deal with the feelings later, I fall a little bit short. I'm like, these are the feelings, right? This is what someone would feel. And she's like, no, it's not. Please go back and try again. So make sure that you get someone who recognizes what your weaknesses are, and then be open to them being like, hi, remember when I said you really sucked at this? This is the moment where you really sucked at this. We're gonna try it again, and give you some directions on how to try it again. If you could do better the first time on your own, you'd have done better. So, like, point me. I will go wherever you tell me to go. Just point me. So find someone you trust to point the right direction.
And like you said, not necessarily your mother, unless your mother is a screenwriter, but in my case, or your boyfriend, because sometimes if it's someone in your life who's, too close, they're
Blinded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even person.
Yeah. Even then, like, if you want someone to give you a gold star and put it on the fridge, awesome. Show your mom, for sure. But, like, that's not going to get you funding.
Yeah.
It's not going to get you published. It's not going to get you organized. It's not going to put anybody in front of the camera. It's going to make you feel better. So maybe if you need that. Yeah.
I just have a question, and you folks are all very involved, but if someone was new to doing this, and they don't have people in their lives, they don't have that network of folks, is there a way that you would recommend reaching out to find someone?
There's a handful of ways. So if you're on Facebook, there's a number of different writers groups for writing. So what's the one that does the meetups? It's in Canada, does the meetups. So those are great places to meet other screenwriters. The other thing is that the Inc. Canada.
Although that's in Toronto, but I don't know.
No, it has a branch in Vancouver, and you can do stuff virtually. That's not a problem.
Okay.
We live in the age of Zoom, man.
Events.
Yeah.
In person.
They're great.
Yeah, so that's a really great place. The other thing is that a number of schools that have writing programs. So in this area, it's mostly colleges. Some of the private schools that have screenwriting programs, they will often have like sort of forum boards for their grads. So if you can access one of those and say like, I'm just looking for someone to do a script exchange. I'll read yours, you read mine. We'll deal with feedback. You can slowly build a writer's group that way. If you're looking for professional advice, there are a number of writing services available online. I work for one, so I work for One Lit Place. And you can, hire a private coach. You can hire someone to do like a one-off. There are also courses that you can take. So look for courses online. Those are really handy. So if you find something that is at the right level for you or that is tackling the right issue for you, go for it and then make friends with your classmates. Yeah, I find that the people that I went to school with are the people that I trust the most. The people that I went to, I did my master's degree in creative writing at UBC. And those are the people that, we're now like 10 years later, I still trust them. I can not talk to them for like 6 months and send them an email and be like, I did this thing, when you have time, can you read it? And they'll do it, they'll read it, and they'll provide me feedback, and it's not all easy. I will have my own cry behind closed doors, but like in the moment, when I am receiving feedback, it is my job to be silent and take notes, that is it. If I need clarification on what the note means or what the note pertains to, I get to ask that question, but there is no prefacing that with okay, so this is my script, but it's a blah, 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 and I did this, and so I want you to think about it this way. No, just, I did a thing, tell me what it's gonna do. So you've gotta bite the bullet a little bit on that one, and that hurts. But the thing is, like everything else, like writing itself, it's a muscle. It takes practice in order to make it strong. And so building that layer of skin that's able to like handle critique of your work, or that's able to be on set and realize that, oh, we don't have the money to do things the way that I wanted to, so I'm gonna have to go back and change everything about this scene. That's okay. It takes a minute to get used to. And practice. Just keep practicing.
You also mentioned Save the Cat a few times, and I know that's a really good resource that I've personally used and a lot of people use.
Yeah, so I would say like if you are just starting to learn how to screenwrite, or if you have been doing shorts, right? I had I had a slightly older version.
Right with him.
Yeah, so that's a really good like intro to screenwriting, because it breaks stories down into pretty like normal sized bites that like any of us can manage. And it also uses pop culture references that are relatively current. I dated myself a lot today by referencing films from my youth, but like I'm in my 40s and I get to do that now. So, but that's a really good resource for new screenwriters. The other book that I would recommend is The Hero's Journey by Chris Vogler. So it's a really good outline of like one of those archetypal story structures that then a number of different stories can fit into. And if you are not sure what to do, just like choose an archetypal structure and treat it like a plug and play. Just be like, this is gonna happen, and then this, and then I don't have to decide what the next moment in my story is going to be. It's going to be the descent into the cave. So in my story, that looks like this part here. And just do that. Because in the end, you'll vary. You'll vary from that. But you need some place to start. And if you want assistance with that, those are some pretty handy ways to start. I would say there are more sophisticated books about screenwriting that I would stay away from for a while. And some of them just end up like doing a lot of navel gazing. They don't actually help anything, or they end up confusing you. So I would say like Robert McKee's Story is one that like, give yourself some time living in screenwriting and getting used to screenwriting before you go in that direction. But any of the other ones, Screenwriting 401, there's also a lot of good books about the production of films that explain what happens in production. I suspect that most of you are short filmmakers who do a lot of things and wear a lot of hats. So the more you can read about how productions work and the ways that things go horribly wrong in productions will help you build. It's true. It is true. But like,
everything that can go wrong
will go wrong.
You're gonna make a film just saying, and then you
absolutely
pretend like it was all easy to do. But
yeah, it was fine. It was fine.
It was great.
But you're
we made.
Yeah, but you end up like a duck, like every smooth. Yeah, smooth on the surface and then legs underneath, right? So get used to those kinds of things and then brace yourself for it. You know, you write the script that's in your heart and you write it the way it's in your heart. And then at the end, you look at it through a producer's eye and you say, they're probably gonna make me rewrite this scene, or they're probably gonna put these two scenes in this other location so we can drop those two locations. And I will be fine with that when that happens, but it doesn't have to happen yet. So just sort of keep that stuff at the back of your head. It's fine. Yeah.
And then some of you probably write as a producer as well, where you're like, okay, so I have this location available to me. I'm going to write it in this location, and I can borrow this location from my uncle. So I'm going to make it happen in this location and this location. Done.
Yeah.
Yep.
I literally just told Trish the other day, let's find something that we can shoot in one place.
Yeah. And you can do those things. Like, those are amazing things. If you want a really good exercise for your first like feature-length film, have it all take place in one location. Get a cabin, write a horror. Right?
Yeah.
People die camping in movies all the time. I have never met anyone who has died camping in real life, but in movies, they die a lot.
Oh yeah, if you go to a cabin in a movie, there is definitely a serial killer there.
Definitely. See?
Just saying, or a monster, or
aliens,
or a ghost. There's
something
that's going to take you down. You are not going to a cabin.
It's true.
Just enjoy the lake. That is not happening.
No.
Ever.
You know, or you're mourning like the loss of something, and so like the weather will be symbolic of how you feel inside, and it will go from stormy to clear, whatever it is. But you know, but choose something simple. One location. It all takes place in one house. Just give yourself parameters and then write within them. And what'll happen is you'll slowly give yourself bigger parameters. If you set out to make your first feature like a Marvel movie action piece, that's too much space. It's too many choices. You will die of overwhelm of choices. Box yourself in a bit, right? And then write your heart out in this sandbox. And then we'll give you this one, and then you graduate to bigger, right? Like I've been writing 20 years. I'm still not ready to write a Marvel action piece. And part of it is just that's too many pairs of tights and too much choice. But I can do a pretty big piece. I'm just not here yet. And I might never be. And I'm okay with that as a writer. I recognize where my limitations are. I recognize what I'm really good at. And I'm happy working in that space. And I'll stretch myself a little bit, but I know when it's a bridge too far. I know when I'm not the right person to provide feedback. I know when I say to someone, I don't write the kind of comedy in this script. I can't give you feedback that will help you. Here's 3 other people who could. Like it's okay to know that. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks so much for coming. I know limited seating seems really weird, but it was really nice to have you here. And I don't know, we'll do it again next year. Thanks for being here. This was fun.